and gentlemen, Mr. Will Dukes.
So by a show of hands, how many of you remember what you had for dinner last night?
Oh,
All right, that's most of the room. Very good, very good. Now, by a show of hands again, how many of you already know what you'll be having for dinner tomorrow night? All right, 3 people. 3 people in the entire room. Well, even though you don't know what you'll be having for dinner tomorrow night, I'd be willing to bet that there's not a single person in this room that has to wonder if they're going to eat tomorrow. Tonight I want to talk to you about analogies, because analogies lay the foundation for how we learn and how we explain new concepts. I want you to think for a second about the last time that you explained a new TV show that you were watching to one of your friends. What other TV show did you use to compare it to? See, neurologically, analogies work because our brains are hardwired for pattern recognition. So as soon as someone explains something to us using something we already understand, it's easier for us to grasp. And so analogies work, and analogies are used all over the place. They form the basis of the constructivist model, which we use in education. They form the basis of hypotheses that we use in scientific research. Even in the practice of law, we use the idea of precedence, which is to say that this case is exactly like some other case that's already been decided. But as ubiquitous as these analogies are, they don't come perfectly. They always have some kind of problems. They may be inadequate, they may grow outdated. For example, when you had the sex talk, how many of you actually talked about birds and bees? Nobody, right? See, I work in sales and marketing, and while those sound like complementary types of functions, if you talk to the president of most companies, they'll tell you that those functions actually do not work very well together. Their work is not aligned, and they fight like cats and dogs, wasting resources and productivity. Why is that? Everyone from your local business coach to the Harvard Business Review has written about this disconnect, and they tend to agree that there's some kind of misalignment of goals. But again, why would that be? One of the explanations that I've found is that the analogies that we use for marketing and sales are broken. In marketing, it's a funnel, and in sales, it's a pipeline. And these analogies are so widespread and so commonly used that there are entire software platforms named after them. So when we think about marketing, we know that there is a huge pool of people that could use our products and services. But at every step in the buying process, that number gets smaller and smaller. Draw 2 lines around that, and voila, you have a funnel. Whereas in sales, we're usually talking about moving people through stages. So we may have a lead here, and then they're a prospect, and then they're an opportunity, and hopefully they become a customer. Just like moving through the stages of a pipeline. So on the surface, these analogies seem great. They're easy to grasp, and realistically, they give us an opportunity to identify areas where we can apply some systematic improvements. But they are grossly inadequate for a couple of reasons. One, inside a funnel or a pipeline, it is a closed system, which means that everything that you put into one end, you would expect to get out of the other, without it being influenced by the external environment very much. Now, one of the most ironic things that I hear marketers talk about is how many people are actually falling out of their funnels that don't make it through to the bottom. Now, I don't know about you, but if I had a funnel, an actual funnel that I bought, and 80% of the stuff that I put into the top was leaking out somewhere, I'd probably take the funnel back to the store. And likewise, in a pipeline, we know that the external environment is affecting us all the time. We have to deal with external market pressures, internal politics, government regulations, and our competition. All of these things affect our sales, and they're all beyond our control. So the idea of a closed system does not work in sales and marketing. We will never get 100% conversion, even though our analogies give us that kind of expectation. Now compound that with the fact that a marketing funnel and a sales pipeline represent independent, isolated, linear processes. Marketing has the goal of generating leads. Sales has the goal of closing sales. And that seems like it is perfectly logical. But the problem comes when we look at those goals in isolation, because it is perfectly possible for a company to look at the activity going on in the marketing funnel and be satisfied, and to simultaneously look at the number of sales coming out of the pipeline and again be happy. But that doesn't mean that sales is actually working and closing the leads that marketing is generating. So you could be wasting completely the effort and budget of the marketing department and wasting the time of the sales department because they're spending time prospecting instead of closing deals. So when we back up and we look at all of the things that are going on inside of generating business, we say, all right, let's just take these and maybe we can connect them somehow so that all of those leads are going through the sales department. And there's a lot of effort that is happening inside of companies to make that happen. But even if you combine these into one process, it is still an isolated linear process. Where do other things that involve revenue generation happen? Like, where in this picture does PR fit in? What about referrals and word of mouth marketing? What about customer service and retention, generating repeat sales? If we don't consider those, what are we missing out on? When we back up and see that big picture, we know that this is not a linear process. It is, in fact, a cycle. It's the sales cycle. This is not new terminology. Most of us in here have heard of the sales cycle. But unfortunately, we only refer to it as a cycle when we're talking about how long that cycle takes. I wonder why that is. Maybe it's because we don't have a good analogy, like a funnel or a pipeline, to be able to describe it. So if we did have an analogy to be able to describe the sales cycle as a whole, it would have to do a couple of different things. One, it would have to describe all of those steps inside the sales process, inside of the buying decision, in a cyclical manner. It would also need to be an open system, open to outside external influences. If it was a really good analogy, it would also have the expectation of less than 100% conversion. And if it was a great analogy, we could adapt it to any kind of business model. Now, I know that sounds like a tall order, but there is a system that each and every one of us is connected to every day that perfectly describes this process. It's a farm. It turns out that the place where we grow your food is a perfect analogy for growing your business. So consider this. When you start to develop a sales and marketing campaign, you have to decide what you're going to sell, who you're going to sell it to, and when do you want it to close. That is not unlike a farmer at the beginning of the season deciding what he's going to grow, where he's going to grow it, and when he wants it to close, or when he wants it to harvest. In a business, branding is all about developing awareness and trust and credibility with your target market. That creates this environment that makes them more receptive to your marketing message. And likewise, a farmer at the beginning of the season has to till the soil. He prepares the soil. He conditions it. He creates a fertile environment where his crop is more likely to grow. But a good marketer knows that you can't just brand forever. You can't just build awareness and expect a sale to close. You have to actually get out there and make an offer and an ask. That is when marketing truly starts, even though you know that every offer that you make will not be accepted. Likewise, a farmer knows that he can't just till the soil all season. If he wants something to grow, he has to get out there and plant the seed, even though he knows every seed is not going to germinate. Now, there may be some cases where the one-call close still exists. But for the most part today, sales is a systematic process. It has to close through follow-up. And in Your business, you have to take those opportunities and nurture them. And you have to protect them from your competition. Likewise, a farmer is nurturing that crop as it grows up and protecting it from the pests. This collectively is cultivation. And how you cultivate your customers depends on your business model. How a farmer cultivates the crop depends on what he's trying to grow. But eventually, all of that has to lead to a sale. If you cultivated your customers and opportunities all season long and did not close in a sale, it would be like a farmer that cultivated the crop and just left it in the field to rot. There has to be a harvest at the end. But that is not the end of the process. Because we know that the most profitable sale that you can make is a repeat sale to an existing customer. And the least expensive form of advertising is word-of-mouth referrals. Likewise, a farmer has to be able to propagate that crop. You propagate a sale into many, a farmer takes a little bit of seed and propagates it into the next crop the next season. That's a complete cycle. But there is still another way that this analogy works really well for business, and that's in the idea of sustainability. Because you see, a farmer, if he's just focused on the harvest at the end, he has a lot of things he could do that would increase yield in the short term, but kill the natural fertility of the soil in the long term. And so year after year after year, the cost of fertilizer would go up and up and up. And likewise, a business that is just focused on profit at the end has a lot of things that they can do to generate a sale, generate revenue in the short term, but that ultimately kill their trust and credibility in the marketplace. And so every year, their cost of sales go up and up and up. It is fundamentally a non-sustainable practice. Now, I want to leave you with one last analogy tonight, and it has to do with the idea of scale. You see, I asked you at the very beginning, how many of you knew what you would be eating? And I made the bet that nobody here had to worry about if they were eating tomorrow night. And that is because less than 2% of the U.S. population is able to produce enough food in such abundance that that is not a question. We actually tend to worry more about what not to eat rather than if we were ever going to eat. But that wasn't the case 10,000 years ago. That wasn't the case for our ancestors. When humans were primarily hunter-gatherers, 80 to 90% of every waking moment was spent just trying to find the next meal. But when we started to farm, when we developed agriculture, over a period of time, our tribes became villages. And those villages eventually became towns. And those towns became cities. You see, for over 100,000 years, hunters lived in caves. But farmers, they built the basis of civilization. Now, fundamentally, I believe that a business exists to create value for others, doing so in an equitable exchange. And when we focus on that value, great things can happen. Our businesses can be the basis for mega change and making the world a better place. So looking backwards, we can see that all of the great developments in society, all of the great things that we're able to do are enabled by the fact that we don't have to worry about where our next meal is coming from. And personally, I can't wait to see what kind of value our businesses can create when we don't have to worry about where our next sale is coming from. Thank you all very much.